Good job. Thank you. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here with you today. It's a great gift to be back at First Congregational. This is where it all began, right? Just about 4 months ago, my installation was celebrated right here in the sanctuary, for which I am deeply grateful. Grateful for the opportunity that, as Rachel said, I appreciated just the pronoun, that I have been with you, meaning that there is this shared ministry between Pacific School of Religion and First Congregational that has deep, long roots. They include the leadership formation of many of your leaders, but also the way in which you contribute to the formation of leaders for the church and the work that we shared in together, whether it's through the field placement of some of our students, by the nourishing that they receive in this congregation, and the ways that this congregation has strengthened our ministry through those who serve on our board. Right now, Scott is our treasurer on the board at PSR, and Pastor DeYoung, we just celebrated the end of her term. She's finishing with all kinds of things in this transition, but she completed her term of service on our board as well, with the board meeting this last week, and we got to celebrate with her as she prepares for continues to prepare with her transitions. And you are in my prayers as you share in this time of discernment, the excitement of what comes next in the ministry and shape of this community. All transitions bring with them the opportunities for new life, for new things to happen, but they also come with the reality of some things coming to an end. And it is important to do both, to acknowledge the grief that comes with change, and to name that not out of fear, but simply in the confidence that we trust in the ministry that God has entrusted to us. So thank you for the chance to be with you today and to share. Okay, my name is David Vasquez-Levy. I've been president at PSR now for 4 months. And my ministry prior to that and throughout most of my ministry has been at this intersection of higher education, the church, and the society. The two areas that particular interest to me have been, I've worked at a college for the last 14 years in Northeast Iowa. We were connecting a little bit about Iowa. It's where all things start, right? At least that's what's happening right now. Everybody's heading to Iowa right now. But I've been serving there, and a lot of my work at this intersection has been around migration. So the ideas of migration, not just as that which moves people across national borders, which we're seeing lots of in our world, but just the fact that mobility is a part of our own lives. As a congregation right now, you're in a moment of transition as well. But transition shapes much of our life. So for the last 14 years, I've worked with immigrants, college students that leave their homes, their communities around the country and around the world to go to a place to be prepared for their life and their migration from childhood into adulthood. So my interest is in the way that our sacred stories, many of which have to do with moments of transition and migration, how do they speak to our lives that we are experiencing increased mobility? And how does our experience of mobility, of change, and transition help us to understand these sacred stories that reveal the moments in which we are most open to the divine? So that's some of what I offer reflections today. And as we were talking with Pastor Rachel about possibilities of text, I decided we would take the story of Elijah and share a bit about. So a few more words about Elijah. The first thing is, Elijah, as you know, was a prophet in the Bible. He was actually the prophet. He was up there with Jesus and Moses, literally. So he's up there with the prophets, right? So whenever Jesus is at the Mount of Transfiguration, this is a bit of an interesting rendering of that, you see Moses representing the law, and who gets, they had to choose somebody to represent the prophetic tradition. Elijah is up there. If there had been action figures in ancient Israel, Elijah's the one kids would have wanted to have. Elijah is the one who got to go up into heaven in the original Harley Davidson, described by those ancient witnesses as a chariot of fire. And he's the one who confronted, as we heard, the priest of Baal, challenging them to a prophet-type duel and coming out ahead. Unfortunately, things didn't go well for Elijah after that. As we heard, King Ahab and Jezebel weren't too happy that Elijah had in one fell swoop dismantled their very profitable Baal-Zar-Oz empire, with which they made lots of profit. And so they are after him. In today's reading, Elijah is, as he often is, on the run. This story doesn't take place on a mountaintop, either at the mountaintop of confrontation, of power, of fire, or at the mountaintop we also know him from, where there is God not in the fire or the earthquake, but in the silence. But in this story, he is at neither of those two mountaintops. This is not a mountaintop moment. It is a valley. Listen once more to the reading. Then Elijah was afraid. He got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there. He ran for the border. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. It is enough, O Lord. Take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the solitary broom tree and fell asleep. Staggering across the Sonora desert, Martin Lopez would run to where he thought he saw water and find nothing. Later, he thought someone was walking out in front of him, and as he followed that image, it disappeared. Nothing but the figment of his imagination caused by the scorching heat of the desert. He fell asleep under the first shade he found in a bush out in the desert. As he wavered between sleep and consciousness, he thought to himself, this bush will be my grave. And he thought of Julia, his bride of just 1 year, and of the child whose announcement of that birth and his expectation of the child they would have together. The announcement of that birth was what finally convinced him to make a run for it, to go al otro lado, to pursue new life and opportunity across the border, hoping against hope that perhaps his child would have a chance to life that was different than his own. Now, like thousands of others before him, Martin regretted the decision to migrate. Certainly not for the last time. Elijah went a day's journey into the wilderness. It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. And he lay down and fell asleep under that tree. Like Martin Lopez and like hundreds of others who are venturing across dangerous terrains in deserts and oceans all over the world, Elijah is running for his life. The power, the authorities pursuing him are not La Migra, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, but they share the same arsenal of fear to control the movement of those who have gone against the lines that have been drawn by those in power. The one who had just days earlier, following God's lead, went against the law of the land and confronted those in power, now contends with God, saying, it is enough, Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. More worn out than afraid, Elijah collapses under this solitary broom tree. Suddenly, an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. Barely waking up from his stupor, under the shade of that meager tree in the Sonora desert, Martin Lopez saw something green in the distance. With the strength he had left, convinced that it was nothing more than another mirage, he still summoned his strength and moved towards that green that he saw in the distance. Almost sure that it was nothing more than a mirage, yet when he found growing in that unlikely place, a zucchini plant. He ate it. Not just the fruit that was in it, but chewed the leaves to get the moisture in them. And on that sustenance, he made it across the Sonora Desert. I heard his story 20 years after it happened, as I sat with Martin in the Yakima Valley in his home, where he and his wife have raised their family, picking the crops we can find conveniently right down the street at the grocery store. To this day, he joked, I can't even look at zucchinis. Every day, angels join Martin Lopez's zucchinis and Elijah's hotcakes, and they place gallons of water out in the desert. They go on patrols with Doctors Without Borders in the waters that divide Africa from Europe, trying to be the ones who bring to those who run for their lives a sense of hope, possibility, survival. People who make an effort to try to help those who are trying to figure out a way to survive in this world, who claim that they too have a right, at least to the crumbs that fall off the global table that we seem to have created with no borders. It is God's angels who meet them as they come into cities and places across this whole country, in free clinics, in food pantries, in English classes. Out in the desert on the way to Mount Horeb, the angel of God came to Elijah. But as it often happens in the Bible, did so not just once, but twice. Sounding awfully much like my mother when my kids are back at Abuela's house, the angel says to Elijah the second time when he wakes him up, "Get up, boy. Put some meat on those bones." Or as 1 Kings reports it, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." That's second helping kind of ministry. Second helping is the kind of ministry Jesus had in mind when he said, "I have come so that you may have life and have it abundantly." The first serving is just so that Elijah can survive, make it over the hump. But the second helping is so that he can live abundantly. Jesus was all about that kind of second helping kind of ministry. I forgot all the slides, sorry. That's my mom's cooking. Like serving up wine by the bathtub at the wedding at Cana, to make sure that life goes on for some good time, that the party can keep going. Second helping kind of ministry is what Jesus was committed to, the kind that says to those who feel that they've tried everything, to go back out into those overfished waters and to bring in an unexpected catch. Abundant second helping kind of ministry, like feeding 5,000 Abuela style, making sure there is enough for all and there's still at least 12 baskets of leftovers so everybody can take some home. Second helping kind of ministry that in the face of adversity and a claim of scarcity says, "I am the bread of life. Whoever believes in me will never be hungry. Whoever lives in me will never be thirsty." The angel of God wakes Elijah up and helps him to get over the hump. But then he comes back and says to him, "God indeed is not done with you yet, so get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." You know, the church is very good at that first serving. We are really good at helping people get over the hump. That first helping that allows people to survive. But I think we have a ways to go on learning from the angel, Jesus, and Grandma to pile on that second helping. To act in charity, which is necessary for survival, but also in justice. without which abundant life is just not possible. The angel of God comes to us and says, get up and eat. Here at the table, where we dedicate the work of the hands in the fields, in the vine, and in the wheat. And we dedicate it and we say, this is the very presence of God among us. The Spirit of God comes to us, the angel of God comes to us, wakes us up and says, get up and eat. Here in community, around this table, around the table of service, around the scriptures, that we may be fed not just once, but twice. To have the strength not only to survive, but to work together to build the kind of world we pray for when we say, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. On the strength of that food, we are told Elijah went for 40 days and 40 nights to the Mount of God. The second helping is for the long haul. If you've been interested in your life, like many of you have been, to address the issues of our society, you know that they cannot be addressed by simple handouts or in the short term, but they require a lifelong commitment. Like Elijah, we probably have found ourselves when we wrestle with issues that ultimately matter, feeling like I am no better than my ancestors. Feeling like the work we do cannot possibly make the difference we expect. Yet to us, the Spirit of God, the angel of God comes and says, get up and eat. The second helping is about moving beyond the symptoms. It is about doing what Martin Luther King Jr. said when he called all good Samaritans, not only to bind up those who got beat up on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, but to do something about that road from Ferguson to Baltimore so that people stop getting beat up. That is second helping kind of ministry that moves beyond simplistic understandings of religion and politics and instead seeks long-term engagement in a world increasingly aware of its rich diversity and interconnectedness. Second helping kind of ministry is what you practice when you do more than put up a sign that says all are welcome, but rather begin to figure out how is it that we create the kind of community where all are truly welcome? What does it require of us, of our structures, of our polity, of our way of being, of our buildings, so that all may truly be welcome? Second helping kind of ministry is what we have had in mind as a community at PSR as we have thought about the kind of work to which we feel called, to prepare theologically and spiritually rooted leaders for social transformation. What that means for us is that there are a few issues in the world that require our attention. They demand the development of leaders. Leaders who have the capacity to think complex thoughts about these issues. That's what theological rootedness means. It isn't just about learning about certain dead old white theologians and how they thought of the world. It is about understanding the world in the context of its history and the work we do on behalf of this world as part of a greater, larger theological story. One that cannot be understood simply by adding the little pieces, but that there is more to it. Something divine, something sacred. And then spiritual rootedness, because it is for the long haul. Because the kind of work that is worth doing requires us to do it for the long haul, and we need to be able to draw from a deep well to do so. Individual spirituality is central and important, but not sufficient. It must be part of a larger, deeper well that sustains our work together. So we seek to prepare together with you the kind of leaders that are theologically and spiritually rooted, convinced that we can bring about the kind of transformation God has in mind for the world. From world news to the challenges in our own lives, we have, like Elijah, plenty of reason to feel worn out. Plenty of reason sometimes to feel like the transition is too much, the work too long to go. But to us, the angel of God comes as he came to Elijah and says, get up and eat. Just remember, on the strength of that food, he went 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. Amen.